unfortunately, we have a few other examples to really enhance the claim that FURQAN was never criterion, but it was the Aramaic word for redemption, salvation, and deliverance.
So what we're looking at here is the word PURQANA. It's in the Aramaic and Syriac, Syriac being a dialect of Aramaic, of course. And we looked a little bit at this during the earlier picture when we were looking at the different languages, the different meanings. The crucial thing here is to note that we have attestations of the use of this term in very theologically rich and important contexts, particularly, I mean, here's one example. Matthew 20:28 in the Peshitta, the word PURQANA is used in the context of the verse. I'll read it out. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as and those who are familiar with the English translations will read this most often as a ransom for many. The word used here in the Peshitta is PURQANA. So it's as a redemption, deliverance, salvation, ransom works too. It all means the same thing. We know what we're reading when we're talking about this. This is referring to his sacrifice, which redeems a multitude. And just looking under here, you can just see the Syriac dictionary. You can use the source to validate this yourself. Just type in salvation into the search bar and you'll very quickly find the word PURQANA given to you in the Syriac script. So that's one example. Let's look further into detail in what we can see in the Peshitta itself. I put the first one on here again. It's the same verse we just spoke on, so I'll skip over it. But you can just see it here on this source. This is direct text from the Peshitta. And for Acts 28:28, there we can see in a lovely magnifying glass the word PURQANA in question. Moving to Acts 28:28, we read, "Be this therefore known to you, that to the Gentiles is sent this redemption, for they will also hear it." Most translations give the word salvation here. It means the same thing. It means PURQANA. So let's zoom in as well to verify. Yep, we have the word PURQANA here attested. Again, in very important context theologically. So this word would have been heavily used in liturgy and is, and we'll see that in a second, by Syriac and Aramaic speaking Christians and Jews alike. So it comes to reason that when the word FURQAN is likely having this meaning. So let's look outside the Peshitta, also in other texts beyond the Peshitta. We have, this is a source which goes into the hymn of the Qurbana. I think it's written somewhere here. Yeah, the eschatology of this East Syrian Qurbana. This is a part of their liturgy where we see in a hymn that it says the text, Savior of our souls. This is written as FURQAN de Nafshathan. I can't read Syriac. I apologize for butchering that. The point, what to note here is that the root, the PRQ root, is essentially conjugated. I don't know if that's the right word because that's usually for verbs, right? But you see that instead of PURQANA, we have FURQAN. Same root, has the same meaning, but instead of meaning salvation, it means savior. So it's making it a noun of a person, an identifiable subject who is the savior. Or instead of deliverance, it would mean deliverer, right? So that's why we read here, FURQAN de, and then the word again, to mean savior of our souls. And this is a title which is applied to Jesus. So you can see how this is gaining momentum here in the importance of this word theologically. It is used in the context of the broad question of how do we get to heaven? Through salvation, through PURQANA. And who is Jesus? Well, he's the FURQAN. He's the savior. So that's just a quick, overview to see how the word PURQANA is extremely significant in the Christian Syriac tradition. Let's move on, and we'll have a look then also at what salvation did Moses receive. And this is just to show also that what we're talking about here is also written about by other scholars. So this is from Fred Donner's work. I'm just going to read the relevant portions here, which is that we see that the Moses refers to the miracle of the crossing of the Red Sea in the Exodus text as the salvation of the Lord, the PURQANA de Maria, where Maria here means Lord. And we see that, well, basically, we're just seeing here that the connection is being made by Fred Donner as well, that FURQAN could potentially have been a derivative of the Syriac PURQANA. And I would argue that's very likely the case. And also when we saw that when the two groups meet, that verse is either talking about the crucifixion or it's talking about the crossing of the Red Sea. Fred Donner here is making the connection that potentially it's referring to the salvation of the Lord, because we do have, and this is crucial, we have the word itself attested in the Aramaic translations of the Old Testament, where they use the word PURQANE, which has the same root we're talking about, it's the same word, to talk about the deliverance of Moses from Pharaoh.
Yes, there are then these links quite well as well with why would Leo III be calling this tome of books that the Arabs were starting to learn as something like Purkan. So it still uses the P, but it's starting to change a little bit. He doesn't actually call it your Purkana, it's calling the Purkan, something like in between. It's almost like the language is starting to be changed slightly, so maybe he doesn't make that connection.
Well,
But it's certainly,
it's not
pardon?
quite that, because okay, so the original word would have been and would have retained its meaning as being PURQANA. When you go from the Aramaic to the Arabic, the final suffix a, so PURQANA, that represents the definite article. So we see this very often in the Quranic text, where then we have an Aramaic word and then it becomes an Arabic word where the a is removed. So instead of PURQANA, it would be PURQAN, right? And then the al definite article would be attached. So you go from PURQANA to al PURQAN. The thing is, the next step, which happens right away, is that if you're now using the Arabic script and speaking the Arabic language, it's no longer al PURQAN, it's now al FURQAN. And the reason why it would be transliterated by a Byzantine emperor as PURQAN is because that's how it would have been sounding to the ears of the Greek. Because the letter is written very in the early Rostam as an F. There is no P. So I don't think we should assume necessarily that what we're dealing with here is in the 730s or 720s when we have the letter from Leo, latestly that, right? Or earliestly that, I should say, rather. We shouldn't assume that what's happening there is that he is listening and hearing them actually say the word PURQAN. It's rather more likely that he is transliterating it. Or, like you said, if it wasn't a letter in the Aramaic language, then he would be using, obviously, the Aramaic version of the word, because the word al-Furqan or Furqana would be the word PURQANA or al-Purqan in the Aramaic tongue, because the F and the P correspond in that way to the different languages.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well that in the Eastern Syriac would be like po, pretty much as opposed to pu,
Right.
which means there were dialects or basically different versions of stuff. So at one point it reaches to his ears, he just transliterates that, say the best he can, but certainly is not Quran. So he's talking about this word. If at that point they had still the understanding that this word has something to do maybe with salvation, then that would make sense. That says, okay, and these people wrote your salvation. Now, if the meaning had already changed in the Arabic and it was your criterion, it would also make sense that it's starting to actually get confused. But when the actual word was first put together on paper, or it was spoken out loud by people, we would need to still be looking at the Aramaic meaning as opposed to the Arabic one, because it looks like salvation in Arabic, salvation and redemption was never really used. However, when we look at the verses in the Quran, certainly salvation, redemption, and deliverance makes a lot more sense than looking at it as criterion. So it's possible that Leo III already saw that as, what is this book that they have? Oh, a criterion. To them is criterion. Okay, fair enough. I'll take it. That we will not know, or maybe we will as we start looking in more depth the history and the historical angle of what was happening there between the years, well, 600 and 800. But for now, still with the Quran, is yes surprising that this guy didn't actually call this very famous book Quran. But I'm sure we will get to that one.
Right. So, and this is just one of the pieces. So, what we've introduced today, and we've done it very quickly, is simply one puzzle piece, and that is the word of FURQAN. Right. So, when you're reading the Arabic text, if you're actually going into it, and I would recommend this to everyone, what you should do is you should throw some money to Saint Murad, get his translation. He has a cheaper version and a more expensive version, whatever, right? But get your hands on a Murad translation, because then what you can do after that is you can just start reading the text, and you'll see things. It'll just pop out at you of what really is going on here. Then go and look at the translations, and we'll go into that soon in our next live stream of the translations. But the point here is that this is one of the puzzle pieces. Once you have this, then you can go to verses like we were looking at before, where it's talking about the descension of the Furqan. And like you were saying, JC, when you were talking about the verse about Moses being given the Torah and the Furqan, that it brings to mind, okay, what could that be? Is that the Ten Commandments? My mind went there myself, so you're not the only one. But then you have, once you have this piece now, you're like, oh, it's talking about salvation. Okay, so either this is the Quranic author responding to a polemic by Jews who are saying, what you believe in, that Jesus is the only way into heaven. What do you believe that Moses is in hell then? Because he was before Jesus. And then the response to that was that no, he was given salvation. Why? Because he was given the Torah by the angel of the Lord, which is linked to the divine word, which is linked to Christ. And hence he met Christ, and hence no, he doesn't go to hell because he was before Christ, because Christ was before Moses, is the point, right? So that's one way of reading it with the puzzle piece now in hand, or you can understand it as deliverance. And yes, Moses was given the Torah and deliverance from Pharaoh. Those are kind of his two big things, right? So once you have the one puzzle piece, you can start unlocking even more effectively other puzzle pieces, and then you start having a satchel on your waist full of puzzle pieces which have been deciphered, and then you will rapidly see that the dominoes start to fall.
Yes, and certainly Furqan is one of those that make the case quite clear that when you look at it about in the Aramaic, you see how that was the original language, and then you can also see, well, a number of things. One is how the language evolved. Also, you can see how they have used the diacritical marks, although that's something that we will use later. And it is worth mentioning that, for example, Saint Murad, he knows that this is like Aramaic. He mentions the problem with the word Furqan before, and he mentions that it was Aramaic and it means redemption. So we really hope that we are actually going to get at one point full Aramaic translation of the Quran. Basically, it's reverting back the Quran that we have to the Proto-Quran, to the previous version, to know what it says. And I think we will all be very much shocked as to what it is that the Quran originally said before it got translated into Arabic. So let us all hope that we get at one point that final version, because it will give everyone a lot of closure and understanding exactly what this book has been about. For now, we are just taking bits and pieces, putting them together, and trying to make that picture clear in preparation for hopefully a final version, final translations where we see exactly the meaning.